Welcome to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. It's brought to you by the World Puja Network, and I'd like to thank the World Puja Network for hosting us and allowing us to have this time to share with everyone all the updates that are going on. And today we're going to be talking about the amazing events that have just occurred at Mount Shasta, California, with the CSETI expedition on Mount Shasta with about 45 people. And I'm joined by Linda Willitts, who's been with us for many years on these expeditions. Thank you, Linda.
Sure.
And it was an astonishing week. We were up there Labor Day week, basically, up on Mount Shasta, and we had a group of people we were training to become ambassadors to the universe. And as I had mentioned, if you go to CSETI, CSETI.org, you'll see that we have these expeditions 4 or 5 times a year. And it's a time when we come together to engage in deep meditation and practice remote viewing and contact and train people to be ambassadors from Earth to these other civilizations, because we know we're being visited by advanced extraterrestrial civilizations, and we know that there's been, up until now, a very poor response from the governments of the world to their presence, and that it's incumbent on the citizens of Earth to say, all right, since the United Nations and the governments of the world have not dealt with this properly, we as citizen diplomats can and should. So we're going to have another one of these expeditions, I might add, beginning on Sunday at our farm here in Virginia, and then in November, the first week of November, we're going to be in Joshua Tree Wilderness in Palm Springs, California, where we've had an astonishing contact and events over the years. But today we really want to focus on a week-long expedition on Mount Shasta that happened just a few weeks ago, 2 or 3 weeks ago, that was amazing, to say the least. We had nonstop contact and sightings of ET craft, and including ET beings on the ground and in the field with us that lasted for the entire week. And it was a week of an astonishing level of contact, and we were really amazed that for the first time since 2000, we had this massive triangular ship out in deep space that appeared and kept reappearing. So we're going to talk about all that today over the next hour.
It was totally amazing. I mean, we always have great activity, but this week it started out with a bang, and it was just incredible.
Right. Well, I think that one of the things I want to share with people is that the group that we had were very coherent. There was a high level of consciousness in the group. The people were ready. They had gotten the meditation CDs and the materials that we have on our website for people to be trained as ambassadors, and they really understood how to make contact. And many of them had been practicing before they came and had astonishing contact experiences with these extraterrestrial beings and sightings of these craft prior to coming. So I think we had a group of just really ready people, and that's why from the very first day the events started happening that often you don't see until later in the week of one of these expeditions and training programs. So it was just a wonderful group, and the real purpose of it is to create the morphogenic field, as Rupert Sheldrake would call it, where humans begin to understand the divine unbounded consciousness within us and can enter into a meditative state to experience that unbounded awareness, and then remote view and see these extraterrestrial beings and use a specific protocol to contact them using not only lasers and electromagnetic signals, but thought and consciousness to show them where we are and invite them for diplomatic purposes. I mean, this is not, we tell people this is not trying to have a sighting for a sighting's sake. It's for the interactive component of it where, as universal citizens, we're saying the children of Earth, many of us are now ready for open contact, and that we want to be the vanguard welcoming them here and to show them the side of humanity that is peaceful and that's enlightened and that understands the true nature of ourselves as universal consciousness aware beings. And I think that this is the real purpose, because when we do this, we find that it begins to affect people all over the world. We have found that people all over the world have begun using these same CSETI protocols, and CSETI stands for the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And at CSETI.org, you can see that since 1990, we have gone all over the world and had the most astonishing success at making this sort of contact. And this was actually the foundation for the disclosureproject.org. And if you go to disclosureproject.org, you'll see that that was really done after we had had successful contact. And a lot of people don't understand that the way this evolved was that in the early 90s, when we had these preliminary teams that went all over the world making contact in Mexico and in England and all throughout the United States, that this got the attention of a lot of people in the government. And I was asked by 1992 to meet with the head of Army Intelligence and then later to brief the sitting CIA director for President Bill Clinton on the ET issue and on the UFO issue in general. And it was because they knew that we had actually figured out the Rosetta Stone, as it were, of communication with these interstellar civilizations. And it had to do with very advanced concepts in physics, but also very advanced concepts in where physics interface with thought and consciousness. And that we had developed these technologies, both in terms of laser and electromagnetic technologies, but also the technologies in consciousness, where we understood that these interstellar civilizations, by virtue of being able to travel faster than the speed of light, transverse dimensions, if you wish to look at it that way, that are increasingly non-local or conscious or aware. And it's a little bit like going from the physical body into the astral body of light and then into the thought body and then the pure consciousness body. That in a sense, each of us as individuals, as we sit here listening to this interview, we are a microcosm of the macrocosm of the cosmology of the universe, that we are really conscious awareness emanating forth our individuality and thought body and astral body of light that we experience in our lucid flying dreams at night, and our physical bodies, which are actually manifested and supported by the astral matrix. So this astral energy is something that ET vehicles, that are actually physical extraterrestrial interstellar vehicles, when they're going faster than the speed of light, they're no longer in a solid material form. They're in this sort of etheric astral form, and all of their technologies that deal with communications, to communicate with each other but also to other planets, is going at multiples of the speed of light. In fact, they're traveling at the speed of thought, because they're using technologies that interface with machinery with directed thought, very coherent, clear thought that's emanating from a silent, deep, meditative state within, which you can attain through meditation techniques that we teach on these expeditions. And so we figured this out back when I started having experiences with these beings back when I was a teenage boy, when I was about 18 years old. Figured out that this is really how this is happening, and this is why so many people have had these enigmatic and somewhat mysterious experiences with these beings that have had a strong component that has to do with thought and consciousness. And it's because all of their technologies that are allowing them to exist as an interstellar species requires that they understand these advanced concepts in physics and the higher states of consciousness. And there's a point here where higher states of consciousness and physics come together in a nexus where you get advanced concepts in electromagnetism and the cosmology and thought and consciousness all come together in this sort of central place. And that's what we're talking about. And this is what we train people in. And then we go out under the stars for a week and we actually do it and experience it together. And it's really an astonishing thing for people to experience.
And what I really enjoy about it is the ETs fully participate in the training of us humans. And I mean, they do things on purpose. I don't know if we've ever mentioned kindness on these calls. Kindness greeted us the very first night out there, and she came once and sometimes more than once every night
That's right. There is a very advanced ET ambassador who is a very high spiritual being, but also an ambassador from these interstellar civilizations. And the night that my assistant, Sherry Adamak, passed away in January of 1998, about 10 years ago, I was introduced to this ET being by Sherry's spirit after she passed away that night. And we have had this very advanced ET being come and literally materialize in the air above us every single time for the last 10 years that we've gone out and done this. And it's often a bluish-white to diamond-white ship that comes in and often will shine a very bright light towards the group and fly over and then go back up and out into space. And it's astonishing. And this craft, with this being on board, it appeared every single night that we were out under the stars at Mount Shasta this year. It was really beautiful.
And you know, one of the ways that the ETs were helping to train us was the very first night in the field, kindness appeared, but also there were those golden lights in the trees that were no more than maybe 40 feet from the back part of the circle.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, yes, so many people, we saw this, everyone facing towards the sort of north and northwest. There was a grove of evergreen trees that are there on Mount Shasta that was a few feet from us that were right around where the vehicles had been parked, and we were in a circle sitting, not even 100 yards away. And there were these beautiful, brilliant white and golden orbs that floated through the trees and hovered there and would appear and then disappear. And these were visible with the naked eye. This
Right.
is not like the orb photography that you see with, people using digital flash. This is just there. And they were there the previous year as well in the exact location. And we know that there is a very advanced God consciousness civilization whose technologies literally emanate from the level of celestial awareness, who are in that area and who we have made contact with increasingly over the last 9 years or so since we first went there in 1999. And what we have found is that as soon as we get on this particular contact site that we have developed there on Mount Shasta, these objects appear. And in fact, there is several excellent photographs right of these ships, orbs in the trees. And one thing I have to point out to people, that to our naked eye, it may look like a 1 or 2 foot diameter sphere of golden light or bright diamond white light, but in reality, it is an actual entire vehicle, and that's all we're seeing of it in this dimension. The example I give is of the military police in Belgium when they visited with us. We went over to Belgium in 1991, I believe it was, or 92, and we went to this little town where there had been this massive 800-foot diameter triangular ship. And this ship, by the way, was seen by tens of thousands of people over the course of a few months there in eastern Belgium. And these was one little town where the ship was, I believe his name was Henri Chapelle. There was a little steeple in the center of the town, like there are in so many European villages, and the gendarme, the sort of police of the area, had been called out, and we interviewed them. And they said the part of the event that they did not report to the media or even to the UFO research organizations is what I'm about to tell people. And that is that this massive craft that was hovering a few feet right above the steeple in the center of the town, that was seen by the entire town. It was like 10 or 10:30 at night. It wasn't like 3 a.m. When it left, it collapsed into, it morphed, if you will, into a reddish-orange throbbing energy field, like a ball of plasma light, about the size of a basketball, they said, and or soccer ball, and then shot upward into space and vanished. It just in an instant twinkling of an eye. And that this entire 800-foot, and this is 800 feet on each side of the triangle, which is a big ship, hovering right over this town, became this plasma-like throbbing form of energy. And they didn't understand that. And I said, well, that was actually the craft as it was energetically, resonantly shifting out of linear space-time into this more etheric and plasma-like energy field as it then took off into superluminal, faster than the speed of light speeds. And they've said, well, that makes sense. I mean, but it was just something where they left it out of all the reports because they were afraid of being ridiculed. I said, oh, no, don't leave that out of your reports because that's the core of the message of what they're showing us. You know, if it just floated around and had a bunch of rivets and seams on it, I would say it was an experimental craft from Lockheed Martin or Northrop or something. But the fact that it did this, you know, now we're talking about the real McCoy and the real thing.
Well, these lights that appeared in the trees, they were. I was watching them through my binoculars. They were distinctly sometimes in front of the trees, sometimes slightly in the trees. You know, you could see them with the branches in the way and stuff. And they moved around. They brightened and signaled in response to your lasering. And this interaction lasted quite a long time. But the thing was, some of the people felt that they were somehow city lights or something that were visible through the trees, and so there was a little bit of dissension among some people. Although what we always do if there's any dissension at all as to where the lights are coming from is we check out the site in daylight and see, you know, and also look at Google Maps and see if there is any possible structure that could be creating lights. Well, it turned out there was not, as we knew. But anyway, there had been that little bit of dissension among some people, and so at the very end of the evening, remember we went to the truck, which was parked right under those trees where the lights were?
Right.
And as soon as you got in the truck and turned on the ignition, the lights spontaneously turned on?
Right. The ETs, we'd asked, in fact, at the very end of the evening, we always asked that these visitors follow us in our vehicles back to our homes and where we're staying. And in fact, what happened when we got in our vehicle, some force, mysterious force, turned the headlights of the truck on by itself. And this was an older truck. It's Linda's pickup truck that you have to actually turn a toggle switch to get the headlights on. And I never touched them, and neither did anyone else. And it was their way of saying, yeah, we were really right here. And it's interesting because it's a very interactive process. And what people don't realize is that once you get into the understanding of being there for the purpose of communicating for universal peace, the healing of the earth, the opening up this new era where we're going to be a universal civilization, where we humans are going to be extraterrestrials going among the stars. I mean, that is the future cycle that we're opening right here at this point in time. As crazy as the earth is right now, that's the cycle that's opening. It's the cycle of universal peace, the cycle of universal being, of higher states of consciousness, and enlightenment. And I think that these ETs, if you go there with that purpose, they will do the most amazing and sometimes comical things like this to let you know that they're with you, and they're going to let you know in all kinds of ways that are subtle and not so subtle that are really beautiful. By the way, one of the people who thought that these brilliant lights that we're in the middle of this national forest and wilderness, he said, it's an installation. It's an installation. He kept saying that it was some kind of an installation or buildings. And, of course, we sent a team up there the next day with high-powered binoculars and stuff, and there's nothing. The whole area where all this was happening, there's nothing but wilderness and nothing but national forest. So it's interesting because a lot of people, when these things are happening very close like that, it's sort of like the Native Americans when the story of Columbus sailing in, they didn't actually see the ships because it was so far out of their paradigm that until Columbus and his men came up and actually shook the hands of the Native Americans, or it was one of the early Spanish explorers, it may not have been Columbus, that they didn't even see it or acknowledge it because it wasn't in their paradigm that it could even exist, that these big galleons and all these people, strange-looking people. So what we find is that for a lot of people, this is so mind-blowing that they can't quite wrap their minds around it until after the fact. And then they go, oh, my God, this is right there. It was like 30 or 40 feet away or 50 feet away.
Yeah.
So that started the very, very first night. And
also that first night, that was when we talked about the bubbles in our compasses in Crestone on our last World Puja call.
Right.
And because and we took that to be a signal from the ETs, because it had never happened anywhere that we've ever done this work except this one site in Crestone, which is on top of a huge aquifer.
Right.
And we took that to be a signal from the aquifer ETs that were creating these bubbles. Well, Jan didn't have a compass in Crestone, so she bought herself a new compass and brought it to Mount Shasta, and this very first night was hoping that she would get a bubble. And she did. She asked the ETs for a bubble, and they gave her one.
That's right, and that's what happens. I mean,
and,
you know,
and there's
like,
also a lot of water under Shasta.
If you're in that state of consciousness and you ask, then you'll find that things happen. And this is what we have found over and over and over again. I mean, in ways often that are astonishing. A year or two ago, we had a group that was doing this and asked, and there were 4 extraterrestrials that completely materialized right outside the circle and were standing maybe 4 or 5 feet from everyone outside the circle. And so this is the sort of thing that, it happens all the time on these expeditions. I think one of the most beautiful things about this particular expedition was that, as I mentioned, everyone was in this state of readiness and had understood the meditation. And we have a new meditation CD out that actually uses a special mantra with a tone to it that enables people to get into this deep state of cosmic awareness. And in doing so, achieve a state of readiness to be ambassadors to the universe, because they are in that state of universal awareness, cosmic awareness. And I think that because people have had the benefit of using these meditation tools beforehand, and so those of you who can't come to one of these week-long expeditions, you can get the whole series of these meditation CDs on the website, disclosureproject.org, and you can get them and practice them, because what that will enable you to do, and people who have done that just on their own, they write back and say, oh my God, I can't believe this worked. I was doing this and I was driving down the road and this ship appeared, or this craft appeared outside my house, or this orb floated into the room, or all kinds of different extraterrestrial manifestations that happen. So it's very exciting. And I think that's why, we're finding that people are now coming on these expeditions in a greater state of readiness, because they have these tools, the meditation practice, and then also the specific CSETI tools for learning how to remote view, see through consciousness distant objects in space and ET beings, and then vector them in. So you actually connect to them and then show them where you're located. So you literally vector them into your location if you're on Mount Shasta, or if you're outside Milwaukee, or if you're in Hawaii, wherever you are. And you do this by zooming back into the Earth, sort of like Google Earth, but you're doing it with consciousness and thought. And this is something, a sort of communication system that interfaces with the extraterrestrial interstellar systems, because all of those are interfacing with a level of energy that's very, very similar to astral body energy or thought imagery, visual thought imagery.
We were in such flow consciousness with the ETs that we were just so connected that it seemed wherever we would look, an ET would appear, a craft would appear, or, they were just communicating, with us in consciousness constantly for this whole week. That's
right. Yeah, it was really beautiful.
It was our second night out there where you began a meditation, and as soon as you touched your prayer bowl with the first sound, the God consciousness craft appeared, and then the armadas of ET craft kept coming nonstop for like an hour.
Yes. Oh, it did. I mean, it just almost never stopped, and we had so many craft in the sky overhead. And one of the things that's interesting is that we had a new third generation, almost fourth generation night scope that a couple benefactors for the organization had purchased and had it hooked up to a new digital video camera. And so for the first time, we were able to film objects that we were seeing, remote viewing, but with the naked eye wouldn't be visible.
Right.
And as it turned out, I don't know if you want to tell people about this big triangle that appeared on, I think it was the third or fourth night, I guess.
Yeah, that. Well, it happened because it was the second night that the triangle flew over. So it was September 5th. It was our last night in the field, in fact, because the triangle came over the first time on the 4th when we were at Sand Flat. And then it came over the second time when we were at our other site. And you were looking through somebody's third-generation night vision at the triangle, and you happened to pan it across the mountain, and that's when you saw this huge lit-up craft on the mountain that I was looking with my image stabilizing binoculars and couldn't see the slightest glow. And it turned out it was only visible in the infrared and actually only through the third-generation binoculars, because when you tried your older first-generation night vision, it didn't show up very well, did it?
No, and in fact, what Linda's referring to is that we had this amazing sequence of events that happened where there is this big, massive triangular object that's out in deep space that has appeared not that often, but when it does, it's so spectacular, everyone there almost faints and falls out of their chairs, because we're not talking about a little thing. I mean, in fact, sometimes it's so big that you can't, people are looking for a discrete object up in the sky, and it's actually covering a big part of the sky. And it's 3 points of light, like 3 really brilliant stars, moving across the sky. And it appeared in Crestone for the first time in many years, and then it came over again at Mount Shasta. And as it turned out, more than the 2 times that we're referring to. I'm going to get to this in a moment. And as it came over, this last night that it appeared, there was an object that came out of it that went straight towards the volcano, Mount Shasta. And right under where this brilliant object came out from this massive triangular craft that we have filmed with this third-generation vision system hooked to the digital camera, right under there, I was looking with the third-generation camera, night vision that someone else had that wasn't hooked to the camera. We had 2 of them there. And I could see that there was this 200 or 300 foot diameter, at least, area that was glowing that had about 7 to 9 discrete lights, some of them sort of vertical, that were in a disc-shaped formation that was way up on the side of the volcano. And I said, oh, my God, what is that? Well, no one else could see it. And it turned out that it's one of those objects that was really shifted energetically into the infrared, which is the heat area, and that with the naked eye and even with really excellent binoculars that had great image stabilizing systems, you couldn't see a thing. And even with the first generation night scopes we have, I would not have seen it at all. There's just the faintest hint that maybe something was there. But with the third generation, it took up a substantial side of the mountainside, and we were then set up the camera and filmed it, and everyone looked through the viewfinder, and they were going, oh, my God. And then they would look through their regular, and I said, well, we've been saying for years that a lot of times that these ET craft will be around, but they'll be shifted in the infrared or in the ultraviolet, and they won't be visible with the naked eye or with just regular binoculars. And now that we're getting this kind of equipment that's really the top shelf sort of optics hooked up to a camera, we're actually beginning to be able to film these objects, which is interesting. You know, there's a major G7 country that's been negotiating with us about having a protocol like we do on these expeditions for their head of state and for the international community to make open contact with these visitors. And we've been saying that you're going to need an entire array of imaging equipment there that goes all the way from the high ultraviolet all the way through the regular visual, all the way through the infrared, in order to be able to image everything going on, because these extraterrestrial vehicles, they're not always like a Close Encounters of the Third Kind movie. I mean, yes, we have seen that, as we've described, but often they are shifted and sort of dematerialized, but they leave a signature, if you will, in the electromagnetic field that's not visible with the naked eye, but is visible with these other things. Now, the pièce de résistance of this entire week is something I just learned yesterday, and that is our technical guy who is operating the camera. He started reviewing all this footage of the week. and he's just now gotten through it. And it turns out this massive triangular ship that is out in deep space, that is this huge thing, turned out 5 nights. It was there 5 nights.
Whoa! That we didn't even see it.
5 times. It was seen
Wow.
5 different times, and we actually saw it with the naked eye, and then filmed it on 2 of the evenings, I believe.
Right.
But it was there 5 times.
Wow.
And it's on the camera, filmed 5
Right.
times. And this is astonishing. And one of the things that's most exciting about this is that for years there have been a number of people who are very good at the remote viewing and using consciousness who will say, well, they sense or they can see an object, but then you look up and there's nothing there. Well, now we're finding that with this specialized equipment that, in fact, they are there.
Right.
And so this is a whole new breakthrough that's happened in the last month or so since we've gotten all this new equipment. I don't think it's any different than the experiences we've been having for 18 years, except we're now getting to the point where we have equipment that actually is excellent in documenting and being able to detect these objects.
Well, that's really great to know, because there have been many times when we've just felt its presence but couldn't see it.
Right.
And if we had this equipment, we could possibly have seen it. But the thing about this triangle is that the 3 bright points of light, mark its points, and it moves majestically across the sky, and for several minutes, like 2 to 3 minutes. So everyone has an opportunity to see it ultimately, and you can see the star field through it as it moves along, but there's sort of like a distortion, like a heat mirage kind of distortion.
Exactly, because it's mainly dematerialized, and it's just lighting up the 3 sides of one plane of what I think is a massive tetrahedral-shaped object. And we know that it's quite large because the first time that we were ever had an encounter, a meeting with these beings in this ship, was at Mount Shasta in 1999, and it was so huge, it was seen all the way from Vancouver down to L.A., and I remember on Coast to Coast AM with Art Bell, people were calling in saying, my God, are you seeing this thing? And it came right over Mount Shasta, and we signaled to it, and it sent a brilliant burst of light right back into the group as it vanished off into the area around Pegasus and in constellation Pegasus. And if those of you who know the night sky, if you can imagine the triangle that's in Pegasus, it was about almost the size of that triangle. It's like 2/3 the size of the triangle in Pegasus, which is huge for something moving up in the sky and over you. And again, it isn't one of these things that appears very fleetingly. It's seen long enough that we've been able to film it, and also everyone who was there was able to see it. It was a very, very exciting expedition, to say the least.
And another interesting thing about it, not necessarily the triangle because it's out of our atmosphere, it's so far away, but all these crafts, the armada of crafts that came in the second night in the field while you were giving a guided meditation, typically whenever even one craft comes over, we're strafed by military jets trying to contain any activity we might stir up. Well, this time there was a real conspicuous absence of military jets.
Yes, it's interesting. There was, and I think that we had some activity, but that I think things are changing to the point now. One of the things I learned recently was when this G7 country said that they were going to initiate this program with us to make contact with these visitors and to have their head of state and their scientific Nobel Prize-winning scientists and others at the event, at the landing, that when this was being discussed initially a year and a half or 2 ago, all of the correspondence between me and this Ministry of Defense of this country had been intercepted by the U.S. government, and it turned out that the ambassador from the United States to this other country called the president of that country and basically said, what the hell are you doing? And the head of state of this country proceeded to tell the U.S. ambassador to that country precisely what they were doing and said, this is what we intend to do, and you're not going to stop us. And basically, the U.S. ambassador said, "Well, let me get back with some folks, and then I'll get back with you." So a couple weeks later, got back with this head of state and said, "Well, you have our blessings to do this, and just don't do it on U.S. soil. However, you can proceed. And not only do you have our blessing, but we wish we could do it, but we can't." Now, this is a very interesting comment, because what it means is that while there are kind of shadowy interests in the military-industrial complex in the U.S. and elsewhere who are still keeping a lot of this information secret and do not want it out, because by disclosing it, they're going to have to also disclose the energy and propulsion systems that allow for such amazing transportation through interstellar distances, and with that, it's going to be the end of oil and gas and the petrodollar and coal and centralized utilities and everything we've talked about on these shows. But I think that in this case, there was a wistfulness in the voice of these U.S. government leaders saying this to this other foreign country, that, this is really amazing what you're doing, and we wish we could do it, but we can't. So there's still some restraints, but there's still some support, is what I'm trying to say. It's very nuanced. And I think things really, really are shifting. And we're having increasing contact. And I think that this is going to continue to happen. I think one of the themes of this whole week, by the way, was that the amount of activity we've had is, and these massive triangular craft that's appeared, and as well as some of the other experiences, is because not only are these things changing with some of the leadership of the world's elite, if you want to call them that, but I think also that there's a critical mass of people on the Earth who now know that we're not alone and are looking into what CSETI is doing to make contact. We've learned that in recent polls, over 80% of the population in the United States, for example, think that there are UFOs and that there are extraterrestrial beings, and that some aspect of the government or someone is keeping it secret. Well, when I first started this project, that was only about 40%. So I think that what you see is that we've reached a critical mass of people understanding this, and that the tide really is turning. At the same time, we're getting very close, and we may have some really big news fairly soon, with these new energy inventors who are working on energy devices that would completely replace the need for oil and gas and coal. And I think that the ETs are ramping up their support for what we're doing by exhibiting this level of contact with a group of 40-some people on a training expedition like we haven't seen since right before the Disclosure Project in 2001. And, of course, it was then in 99 and the year 2000 that we first had this massive triangular craft appear, which I think is way out in deep space and is an interstellar sort of community vehicle that's out there. Now, some of these can be enormous. I have a military advisor who was at the specialized console, it was called at that time, I don't know what it's called today, at NORAD, the North American Air Defense Command in Cheyenne Mountain, Colorado. That's deep under Cheyenne Mountain. It's basically where World War III would be fought. In that facility, there's a specialized room that I've had confirmed to me by several of our military witnesses in the Disclosure Project that does nothing but track these extraterrestrial vehicles when they're way out in deep space. And I was told by an extremely reliable senior military advisor for the project that some years ago he was told that on console 52, which was the actual number for that console at the time, that was very compartmented and very secret, within a very secret facility. This was the most secret area, that they had tracked out in our solar system an object that was 26 miles in diameter, moving, quote, under its own steam. This is someone who was from a naval intelligence background, and so kind of used that kind of concept, which I thought was kind of funny, to describe an interstellar vehicle. Of course, they're not using steam power like we still do, but the concept was that it was clearly not a natural object, and it was 26 miles across. I mean, this is the size of a fairly large city, floating in space. So We do know that these have been imaged by our Deep Space Network, the DSN that we have, and that it's been imaged on these systems. And we have had these kinds of experiences with these sorts of enormous deep space objects that then will send orbs and objects and even beings on the ground around where our group is. So it's out in space, it's in the atmosphere, and then it's on the ground around us. And so it's a very exciting series of events that have begun to really increase in frequency and intensity, which I think means that there's a lot of changes on the horizon.
Awesome. Yeah, we had some really profound experiences this year, again, as always, in the cathedral area. We call this one area that's slightly higher up from our site, and it's a little clearing surrounded by huge, tall conifer trees.
Oh, beautiful, yeah.
We call it a cathedral, and when you're in the cathedral, you have just this beautifully framed view of Mount Shasta, and you have the total sense that ancient beings used that as a sacred site. You just know they did, and we do too. And we had some celestial presence, avatar presence, ET, God consciousness ETs up there.
Oh yeah, I mean it was just amazing. And see, what a lot of people don't realize is that just as humans can have experiences that are deeply spiritual with other dimensions and the astral and celestial, these extraterrestrial civilizations do as well, and even more so because if you are capable of traveling through interstellar space, you're going faster than the speed of light, and you're traversing dimensions, if you will, where all of that is happening. So most of what exists in the cosmic order, as I understand it, is beyond the speed of light. It's beyond the material universe, and this is something I think is clearly the case that when we have these experiences unfolding, it's not just extraterrestrial, but there's an involvement with higher consciousness, the divine being, celestial beings, angelic beings, and people say, why would that be? I said, because that is how the cosmos operates. Just because we don't always see it or acknowledge it doesn't mean that that's not how it's operating. And I honestly think that any civilization that has attained technologies and have been allowed to leave their biosphere have reached a state of consciousness and understanding of the cosmology, if you will, or the cosmic order, that they really do understand these other dimensions. They have to, because you can't travel thousands of light years in space going at the speed of light or below. So when you go beyond the speed of light, you're crossing into these spheres or realms of energy and forms and beings that are many people have called by various names, whether it be astral or celestial or what have you. And there are different gradations of that as well. But what we find is that when we have these experiences, there is a really sacred component to it and a very spiritual component to it. Along with the ET presence, there are these other celestial beings that are there. And it's because the group is in a state of meditation. And one of the key things we do at each one of these gatherings, and we do it every night, is that we go into a deep state of consciousness and see the earth and see all the people of the earth and see it being suffused in the light of peace and the transformation from the time that we're in now to this time of universal peace and abundance, and these new sciences and technologies that have been kept secret for so long being unveiled and being allowed to be put to the use of the benefit of humanity, and the recreation of a civilization on Earth that is at peace and that is progressive and that has very advanced technologies that don't damage the environment in order for us to live on the Earth in harmony with the environment. And I think that we also recruit the Earth being herself, because we understand and have had experiences that the Earth is a conscious living being, and that Gaia, the Earth, is a female, and she is very much under stress by how humans are living on her right now. And that if we're working for peace and we're working for a sustainable civilization, we have to also include really serious work with the actual technologies and sciences that not only emanate from higher state of consciousness understanding, but the electromagnetic and physical sciences that have to be unveiled, because you can't have 6 or 7 billion people living on a planet burning coal-fired power plants and using gasoline and diesel and other life and earth-destroying systems for much longer. I mean, we've had over 100 years of that, and it's really reached a point now where we simply can't go another 20 or 30 or 40 years. So the time has come for not only the understanding that we're not alone in the universe to happen and for us to live together peacefully, but the means for being able to do so that we're not all having oil wars and fighting over resource depletion and destroying the biosphere, is that we've got to also facilitate and support the unveiling of these astonishing new energy technologies, which have been known for 50 to 100 years in classified projects, and which we're working very hard on at the orionproject.org, as you all have heard. And we are still calling for people who understand these sciences to join with us in building up some initial prototypes that can be shown to the world to prove this science, and then begin to build them up to get them out in the next few years, because we really have to understand that in order to fulfill the promise of humanity and the long-term fortunes of humanity are very much tied up in these understandings in consciousness, the establishment of world peace and universal peace, and the use of technologies that don't destroy the environment, but that also enable us to live within a social order that is just and abundant. There is no way you're going to have peace on this planet if you have 10 or 20% of the world's population consuming 90% or more of the world's resources, and the other 80% of the population is in poverty, and a full one-third of the population of the earth living on less than a couple dollars a day in mind-boggling poverty. There's just simply no way that is a sustainable paradigm, either from the point of view of the environment or geopolitically, geoeconomically, or spiritually. It isn't going to work. And you're not going to fix that problem by building more coal-fired power plants and by drilling for more oil. You're going to fix the problem by getting people who understand these larger issues together and saying, look, it's time for these really advanced sciences and physics to come forward and come out and to be used for peaceful purposes and not aggressive purposes, so that we have these technologies that begin to be to benefit all the children of the earth, and we will see that within a generation the environmental situation will turn around, the geophysical situation, the geoeconomic and geopolitical order will be much calmer. And I think the other thing to remember is that even the population growth will be reversed, because in every study that has been done, when a group of people, when say a culture or civilization begins to have more abundance and is lifted up out of poverty, and the women in particular have educational opportunities, what you find is that the birth rates go from 10 or 11 children per woman down to 2 or 3, which is basically homeostasis. That's where basically your population isn't going up or down, and that is really the case. And that even and they've done studies where there are societies that once had 10 or 11 children per woman that are now having 2 or 3 because they've been able to have education and prosperity and justice and economic development occur. Well, imagine if the whole planet has access to that in a way that doesn't damage the environment. The Malthusian crisis we're facing now will be greatly corrected. The economic situation that we're facing will be corrected. But also the basic fundamental violence of such great disparities of have and have-nots, of great injustice where people are impoverished, will be changed forever, because every village, and in fact eventually every home, but certainly every village can have its own source for clean energy, water, electrification, refrigeration, and even manufacturing that can be right there locally based. And it's a totally different, on the one hand, we're going to be a much smaller planet in terms of being interconnected, as we've all seen with sort of the internet and whatnot, but we'll also be a much more self-sufficient. So there are going to be these two processes that go on at once, where we're more of a global civilization, but the empowerment, literally, in terms of power and energy, but empowerment politically, will really be happening at the local level. So it'll be a globe of very self-sufficient villages and communities, because the ability to do so will exist in these new understandings of physics and science and consciousness, whereas the current order requires that everyone be tethered to this line of supertankers coming out of Saudi Arabia, or the coal fields of Appalachia, and the centralized electric grid, et cetera, and so on. So it's a very, very different paradigm, and it would be an extremely liberating paradigm. Of course, there are a few hundred people who sort of run the world's global geoeconomic order who benefit from the current arrangement, who would have to accept this change. And this is one of the big issues we need to ask that people, that they pray that people find the grace, if you will, and the awareness to allow the good to change, to this good change to happen, because it's the only possible sustainable future that we have as a people on this planet.
And it's really gratifying after all these years that we've spent under the stars meditating on this very subject and communicating with the ETs, I mean, to really see some change in motion right now.
Oh, there is. Yeah, there's a huge amount of potential happening, and the listeners at the World Puja Network will be hearing a great deal about this as soon as we get some breaking news on these energy devices. We hope we have some good news on that in the near future. And in the meanwhile, I'd encourage people to look at our website, CSETI.org, and if they're interested in joining us in Joshua Tree in November, a little over a month from now, we have had some of the most amazing experiences we've ever had up in Joshua Tree National Park, and we'll be, we're planning to be up there in early November, and it's an exciting expedition, because there is a contact site there, similar in many respects in terms of experiences, although different in others, to the Mount Shasta site, and it's up in the central part of that national park. And as you may recall from an earlier interview, we were there some years ago, about 12 years ago. Linda was the first time I think you were with me,
right.
First or second time, and we were there, and there was this massive ET craft that came straight out of the zenith of the sky that was about 200 or 300 feet in diameter, that was this beautiful kind of teal green color that was shaped flat on the bottom and then sort of shaped like a Hershey's Kiss, that came straight down over the desert and lit up the whole desert and then emerged into the earth. And basically they were showing us this place under the ground in the middle of this national park where they come and go. And we have since set up our contact site right on the edge of that big plain or field. And we have had amazing contact experiences there. And we'll be there, as I mentioned, that first week in November. The dates and all the information are at CSETI.org.
Yep, that's been, I mean, there's no end to the just amazing and wonderful and spiritual experiences that we've had out on these adventures, and to know that we're really making a difference in the world, too, with our meditations. Is really wonderful. Yeah,
it's very powerful when there are 30 or 40 people in a higher state of consciousness doing these meditations and doing the meditation for the healing of the planet and the guidance of the people of the planet and the leaders of the planet. It really does have a profound effect, and I think that's one of the great purposes of these gatherings. It's more than just seeing an object or having a personal experience. It's more about this transformative energy that can come through us as humans and have an effect on the earth and through our fellow humans who are with us on this planet at this critical time in history, because this is the time of the transformation of the planet from the old ways of division and separation and destruction to a new time of universal peace and sustainability and enlightenment. And that's the time that we're here to help establish, and it's exciting to all work together on such a great undertaking. Well, I would like to thank you, Linda, for joining me today, and I'd like to thank the people at the World Puja Network for hosting us for this hour, and thank you for listening to Conversations with Dr. Stephen Greer. It's been brought to you by the World Puja Network, our friends there, and I do thank them again for hosting us on these interviews. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.